But today, I'm the greatest of all time. Thank you.
Never stop, I'll get it if I want it. Gotta make to myself a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top.
Yo, no, I ain't the type to give up. If I do something, man, I do it till I get what I want. I turn a business out of nothing into something I love. I got a poker face, but honestly, I'm not one to bluff. I flip a switch, never miss, man, I always stay up. Don't let them see you, always have a plan to stay tough. This life ahead of you ain't easy, it was built to be rough. But that's what makes a personality, is tragedy, bruh. So keep your head on your shoulders. Now we ain't out here moving rocks, we out here moving boulders. Now we ain't getting posterized, we out here making posters. And we ain't got nothing to hide, we move forward like soldiers. You better wake up for the pay stub, or you'll pay up. Don't make love to the game, bruh, fuck the game up. Change up, rearrange stuff to your greatness. Same us for the way up, play the game, bruh.
Never stop, I'll get it if I want it. Gotta make to myself a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top, yeah.
You know I'm always honest, there ain't no way I'll never stop it.
I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top,
I'm always flirting with pain, she like to hurt me and maim. I'm always working to change, but she's still lurking the same. I keep on building a dynasty while the haters be trying me, but they hate from inside.
Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. Welcome to the Elite Sports and Entertainment Network. Dustin Reese along with Jay McLovin. Jay, how's it going and how was your weekend?
The weekend was good, honestly. We went down to the house, looked at some things. The house is coming along, and yeah, man, it's been a crazy week, man. Lots of moving pieces, man. My youngest one's getting ready to go up to Tennessee, so yeah, it's been pretty eventful, man. How have you been?
Just busy. There's been some pink eye going around the house. Not me, of course, but other people have gotten it around the house, and now it's starting to go around the kids' school, so I'm pretty sure that's going to trickle down through everybody else shortly here.
Oh, that's never a good thing.
That's always a good thing. What are you talking about?
I don't know if I've ever had pink eye in my life. I've just heard really bad stories about it.
It's not that bad. You just got to take eye drops for like a week. Not that bad.
I'll take your word for it. I hope I don't get to that level, Dustin. But if I do, the VA got my back. They'll just throw me some eye drops. What ads?
So, yeah, I figured today's show we would do more of like a weekend recap of kind of what's happened this weekend, because it's been a very busy weekend in sports across the board. Yeah. Football, hockey, basketball, baseball, racing. It's just been a very, very busy weekend. And I want to start with kind of the big story that I kind of sent in our group chat on Saturday afternoon after Wake Forest upset Duke. And we got to talk about this whole court storming situation. You already saw it once earlier this year when it came to Caitlin Clark, and Caitlin Clark got bumped into on a court storm situation. Granted, she wasn't hurt at all. I think she just said she had like a bruised shoulder, so nothing major for her. But now you get to the situation with Duke and Wake Forest on Saturday, where not only was Wake Forest storming the court before the game was officially over, but Duke's best player, Kyle Filipowski, who is a 6'11", 260-pound center and is not like a small human, so it's very easy not to run into him, gets run into not once, not twice, but 3 times as he's trying to get off of the court, ends up leaving the court with a sprained ankle, but is having an MRI today to determine how serious that sprained ankle is. Now you have Wake Forest head coach saying he doesn't like court storming. John Shires calling for the NCAA to do stuff. Wake Forest athletic directors calling for the NCAA to do stuff. In my opinion, I think Saturday was the last court storm that we're going to see for a while, because it's getting to the point where these students are using it to their advantage, and they're actually storming the court now before the game's even over, which is putting players, coaches, and everybody at more risk than what it would normally be.
Yeah, that's always one of the detriments, to any crowd situation. It's these guys, I understand people, maybe they're doing it because they're enthusiastic because their team gets a win. I get that, man. I mean, I understand the enthusiasm of stuff, right? Tearing down goalposts and all that stuff that they've done in the past. I get all that. But sometimes you have to understand, when you're messing with somebody's livelihood, when you go into that situation, number one, there is no way to escape it. So you're in you're already in kind of like a funnel of destruction, right? And you're messing with somebody's livelihood. I mean, maybe it's just a sprained ankle for this young man. He could rebound from it and keep on rolling. Maybe it could lead to something more serious next time or even this time. But I mean, we're messing with people's livelihood, the ability to play a game that possibly could be a potential career earning money for him. So now you're messing with that. I mean, and then to the end of the worst effect is, what if they get stampeded on? What if it's not a player? What if it's a little kid that's storming the court and he gets trampled on? Now we're looking at potential life-threatening situations. I mean, it's never a good idea in a small venue. Maybe on a football field you can kind of get away with it, but on a small court like an NBA court, that many people, the NCAA is going to have to step in, and I don't know what the measure is going to be. Dustin, what do you think? Are we going to start maybe limiting?
Well, I guess from what I've heard, I don't know how accurate it is, but the main talk about it at this point is, let's just say the home team upsets the number 1 ranked team in the country and the team storms the court.
Yeah.
That home team would then be forced to forfeit the game, which you're putting a team now that, let's just use Wake Forest, for example, this weekend. They were considered a bubble team at this point to make the NCAA tournament. Right. With their win, they're pretty much guaranteed to make the field as long as they don't lose like a game they're not supposed to lose. But you could look at it this way now, where Wake Forest, they're predicted to make the NCAA tournament. Let's just say they would have had to forfeit this game now. What happens if that forfeit is what keeps them out of the NCAA tournament? How much money is that school going to lose because of the decision those students made?
Right, and that's gonna require a lot on these schools to make sure they get that kind of information out. Hey, look, don't be storming the court. If you do it, then we're out of it. So it is going to be, and then, of course, they have to do the ring announcements. But I actually think that's a good idea. I don't, you don't want to see anybody get eliminated from a tournament, but at the same time, that's probably something that's going to carry enough weight to keep people from actually doing it. But then again, though, Dustin, there's always those couple of knuckleheads that are going to try it.
Yep, and the thing that I also look for too in this is let's just say Kyle Filipowski would be seriously hurt to the point where his season would be over, and we'll just say, even on a worse side of things, let's just say he would have gotten hurt to the point where his career would have been over. Not only is Kyle Filipowski going to sue the university for that, but obviously if there was a way to figure out on whatever kind of camera you can use, if there was a way to figure out who did it, he's not only going to sue the university, but he's going to go after the kids that ran into him. But then you have to look at the same situation where, let's just say a player clothesline somebody running onto the court just so they have a path to get off of the field. Now, if they clothesline somebody and the student ends up getting hurt, well, then that student's going to go after the player for assault and things like that. So it's just like, at some point, you're going to have to just be a grown-up and be like, you can't do this kind of stuff, because either A, we're going to get sued as a university because something's going to happen to their player, or B, the other university is going to get sued because something's going to happen to our student because the player took matters into his own hands to protect himself on the court.
Right. I mean, at some level, yeah, you have to. The NCAA is going to have to, like you said, come in and put sanctions down, because I think that's the only way you really get it under control. Either you want to put sanctions down, or you're going to back up the crowd to a reasonable distance away and then put up some sort of a barrier, right, to where it's almost going to be like hockey, where you got to watch it through glass to protect the court, right? I mean, and nobody wants any of that craziness, right? So I think sanctions are probably still your best bet.
I'm honestly at the point now where when you watch wrestling and you see kind of that barrier that they have around the ring, how it's like the padded wall around the ring that when you're sitting down, the barrier comes up to about your chest that you can still see over the barrier, and then when you're standing, it's still like waist high. I'm at the point now for like where the students sit, not necessarily where the rest of the crowd sits on like court side, because those are mainly like adults and people that aren't in school that could care less like to storm the court. But on the two ends of the floor where the students are, I'm already on board to kind of put up the type of barriers that wrestling does, because even if you want to storm the court, it's going to take you a couple seconds to hop over those barriers anyways. And that extra couple seconds would at least allow the players to get off of the court to the sideline area where nobody's storming the court. So at this point, if you're going to allow it to happen, you at least need to put in some sort of barrier to make it a little bit harder for all those students to get over that barrier at one time, because you're going to only be able to get a certain amount of people over that barrier at one time. So at least it's going to eliminate how many people can get on that court at once.
Right. I mean, they're going to have to do something because at the current status, you can't have it keep going this direction. I mean, like now, most likely, we haven't seen anything that was enough to either end a career, hopefully, or anybody's died from it. But you got to imagine Murphy's Law is out there, and it's only a matter of time before something like that could lead to that. So I think right now, while nothing has really, really happened other than some sprains, is a good time to put those sanctions in place. So, like my dad always said, an ounce of prevention is like a pound of cure, right? So maybe they're saving somebody's life by putting those sanctions in. Nobody wants to see a team get eliminated, but at the same time, nobody wants to see anybody die either. So
exactly,
I'm all for it, man, honestly.
And some of the other things that happened in sports this weekend, obviously the big news in Major League Baseball was the first of the big five Scott Boras clients finally signed, as the Cubs and Cody Bellinger reached a 3-year, $80 million agreement. Basically, it ends up being a 1-year, $30 million agreement because he can opt out after year 1, he can opt out after year 2, and so on. And this is just another classic example of, I think Major League Baseball, in particular, the owners and the general managers, are sick and tired of Scott Boras. I think this is kind of a slap in the face of Scott Boras, and they're basically saying we're not going to cave into your asking price anymore. If your player wants $30 to $35 million a year, we have no problem giving them $30 to $35 million a year, but you're not going to get a 10-year deal out of it. You might get a 3-year deal, you might get a 5-year deal to shorten like these contracts. But if the players want these, if these players want these 10-year deals, they're not going to get the 30 to 35 million anymore. If you want the 30 to 35 million, you're going to have to settle for the short-term deal that Bellinger got. And now you're hearing that the Yankees and Blake Snell are close to a 5-year, $150 million agreement. Same situation. He was looking for 9 at 270, 10 at 300. Yankees are like, we're not going to give you 10 at 300. If he wants $30 million a year, we'll give it to him, but we'll only give it to him in like a 5-year deal. So I think Major League Baseball, in particular, the owners are starting to kind of not budge on Boras anymore. They're kind of seeing what Boras does. They're kind of getting to the point where they're sick of Boras basically dictating the market and holding up a lot of the market for what he's asking for. So now their counter is, your players want more money, we'll give it to them, but they're going to have to take a less length term, and I think that's going to be the trend now. I think Snell's going to get a lot less than what he wanted. I think Matt Chapman's going to get maybe a 2-year, $40-45 million deal as opposed to 5 at 100 like he was looking for. I think Jordan Montgomery might still get 4 years at 110, but I don't think he's going to get a 6-year deal anymore. And I think this is kind of the first step into baseball, basically saying Boras is bad for baseball, or at least his negotiation tactics are bad for baseball, because you look at it, he cost Cody Bellinger $200 million for asking for $300 million, because now Bellinger's only getting $80 million as opposed to $300.
Yeah. And then if you're Bellinger, are you upset with Boras and maybe thinking like maybe Boras wasn't the right guy to go because he's trying to get more and costing him more?
I don't necessarily think that. I think everyone knows that Boras is the right guy to go to in terms of getting you the money. But I think at some point you need to be realistic. And when it comes to Bellinger, like, I understand that Bellinger had a great year last year. And I understand that he was the Rookie of the Year in 2017. He was the MVP in 2018. But what he did between 2020 and 2022 were terrible. And that's kind of the thing that teams are looking at. That's the one thing that Boras never did. Every time Boras has a client, he looks at the client's current year. So Boras was taking what Cody Bellinger did in 2023, and that's how he was setting the market. He's like, if this is the type of production Cody Bellinger is going to give you, this is what he's worth. But what Boras doesn't do is he doesn't look at the player's track record. He doesn't look at the player's entire career. He just bases it off of that final year. And that's what the Cubs and a lot of these owners are doing now. They're starting to look at the player's overall track record. And when it came to Bellinger, yes, when he plays as well as he played last year, when he plays as well as he played in his MVP season, he's a $30 million a year player that you should be able to sign for 6 or 7 years. But then you have those 3 years. Granted, some of those were injury type of seasons, but it was still 3 horrific seasons. What happens if you sign Bellinger to a 6-year deal, and 4 of those 6 years are like those 3 years in Los Angeles? That was the big hang-up where nobody wanted this long-term deal, because they can't guarantee themselves that Bellinger is going to duplicate what he did last year for the length of a 6-year deal.
Yeah, but you got to understand, Scott Boras isn't going to do that. He's a salesman. He's not going to show you the track record. He's only going to show you what has he done for you lately. That's his job. His job is to get as much as he can for his client and for himself. So he would never, ever, ever, and honestly, no good salesman, no good agent's ever going to show you the bad. They're only going to show you the good and base it off of the good, right? Because honestly, if Bellinger would have been up for contract in 20 through the 22 time period, he's not. The owners are going to. Everything's going to be focused there. So
he was a free agent. He was a free agent last year, and he got a 1-year, $16 million deal. And everyone thought
it wasn't like what he's gotten over the contract he just.
But everyone thought the Cubs overpaid for him last year because everyone was like, "Look at what he did the last 3 years." But when the Cubs signed him to that 1-year deal last year, the Cubs said, "We at least know that he's played at an MVP level. So signing him to a 1-year, $17 million deal, it's not going to hurt us. If it doesn't pan out, it's a 1-year deal. But if it pans out, we have a chance to sign him long term." But now Scott Boras wants to use the same situation saying, "Oh, yeah, he had a great year last year. He deserves a 10-year deal." Not necessarily, because the Cubs gave you a chance last year. The Cubs weren't going to sign you because they looked at the last 3 years that he did nothing. They took the chance on him last year. He produced, but the Cubs still aren't going to be like, "You produced one good year. You deserve the 10 years. You still had those 3 down years where we have to consider that in our contract."
It's a good point. It's a good point. And not only that, but I think Cody Bellinger did do good, or Boras did do really good for Bellinger, giving them those opt-out years after. So if he continues to go down the track of excellent baseball, then it does open him up for even more money. So, sometimes that short contract can be a good thing for the players, if they're trying to get the more quant and they're not getting it over, because you can get 10 years. It may not be the average salary per year you want, right? So it gives them an opportunity to continue to show how good he is to really even get the more lucrative deal.
And I think that's what's happening a lot. And I think that's what's happening with Blake Snell too. You look at Blake Snell in the year that he had last year. He won the Cy Young. Obviously, he had a great year last year. He won the Cy Young with Tampa Bay in 2017. He became just the 5th or the 6th pitcher to win the Cy Young in both the American and National League. So we've seen Blake Snell dominate. Right. But then what did Blake Snell do in San Diego in 2021 and 2022? He was absolutely terrible. He was absolutely terrible the first 2 months of the season last year. And I think that's kind of the hang up on this deal too, where people are looking at what he did last year and said, yes, he had a great year last year, but where was that the first 2.5 years in San Diego? And did he only perform well last year because he was in a contract year? Because the first 2 years in San Diego, he was absolutely terrible. And if you get the Blake Snell that was the Snell in 2021 and 2022, he's not even worth $15 million because he was one of the worst pitchers in the National League those 2 years.
Yeah. And that's the thing, though, about baseball. And unlike a lot of other sports, baseball is very streaky. It's very hot, it's very cold, and it can, go left and it can go right. So, that's the only thing, about baseball is it is unpredictable. It depends on when you get hot. If you look at Verlander last year, it wasn't his Cy Young year, right? Versus the year before that. The year before that, he was lights out. And then you get into last year, and he was just an average guy. He was an average, I won't say average, but it wasn't Verlander.
No, he was, yeah.
And then even if you look at regular season Verlander and postseason Verlander, it's like you get the tale of two Verlanders. So, you can be the best at a lot of things, but you can also go through streaks of good and bad, hot and cold periods of baseball for a player. It happens.
It does. And next topic is going to be obviously hockey. I know you don't watch much hockey. I watch a lot more hockey than I think most of us on the panel do, but there was a very special day in the NHL yesterday as Chris Chelios had his jersey retired by the Chicago Blackhawks yesterday. Okay. Not only that, but one of the greatest, if not the greatest American-born hockey player, Patrick Kane, returned to Chicago for the first time since the Detroit Red Wings signed him this offseason, or not really this offseason. They signed him about a month and a half into the season, and he got his video tribute. He obviously was there for Chris Chelios because he played with Chris Chelios. He's got such a connection with Chicago yesterday that obviously nobody was going to boo him because of everything he did for that organization. He helped them win 3 Stanley Cups in 4 years. He helped change the culture of that franchise, at least for a decade. And what does he do? In honor of his day back in Chicago, he puts home a game winner in overtime to beat the Blackhawks 3-2. And all the cheers that he was getting at the start of the game quickly turned into boos. And being the type of player that Patrick Kane was, he just kind of soaked that in and basically said, I'm Showtime, I don't care. And he basically took the boos with a grain of salt. But for those who don't know the Patrick Kane story, he ended up having a season-ending / off-season hip surgery known as hip resurfacing surgery. And basically what that means is your hip is in such bad shape, you pretty much have to go through a reconstruction of your entire hip. And that injury is seen as the end for NHL players, as it's an injury that typically ends players within a year, maybe 2 years after they have that surgery. And normally the players that do come back from it don't even play at the level that they were beforehand. But at 35, almost 36 years old, Patrick Kane is not only defying the odds of this surgery, but he's playing at a level that he hasn't played at in a couple of years. And he looks like the pre-surgery version of Patrick Kane right now, which just goes to show you the amount of work that this man puts in on the ice and just the amount of hard work and dedication he has to the sport.
Yeah, it's always good to see somebody, that has gone through a period like that, bounce back and get back. And it doesn't happen very often. I mean, those are rare feats for your body to go through that. And that's a very invasive surgery. I mean, you're talking about the entire hip. I mean, everything of your life is based on those two particular, joints. So kudos to him, man. Congratulations. And I'm glad that he had the type of story like that. And that is a comeback player type of story. That's what when you see like comeback player of the year awards and things like that, those are the ones that I like to see really get that award, because it really is a comeback from what should not be a comeback.
Yeah, and right now I believe, if I'm going to just check quick, right now the Detroit Red Wings are tied for the NHL lead with, I think they have 9 players with over 10 goals, and I believe they have 6 players with over 15 goals. And with the goal yesterday, Patrick Kane has 12. So if he keeps this pace up, this is 12 goals in only 23 games. Because he missed the first 18 games due to the surgery and he had to recover. Then he missed another 2 weeks mid-season because he took a shot to the hip, and a lot of people thought his hip was hurt again, but it was only a minor injury, so he missed 2 weeks. So the most games that he can play out of an 82-game season right now is 50 games. And he's on pace to have 25 goals in 50 games. He's definitely going to be the front runner for the comeback player of the year, and he may already have had it locked up based on the level of play that he's playing at right now.
Yeah, I can't imagine going through that kind of a surgery and coming back and playing at that level and you don't get the award. That would be ridiculous. That would almost make me question that award.
And then the last topic we're going to talk about today before we sign off is NASCAR. And NASCAR season is in full swing now. Obviously, this was the second race of the series. This week's race was in Atlanta. But this is going to go down as one of the best, if not the best finishes we've seen in a long time. You had 3 drivers that pretty much dominated the race. You had Ryan Blaney, who led 31 laps, Kyle Busch, who led 28 laps, Austin Cindric, who led 32 laps. Those drivers finished 2, 3, 4. Then you had Michael McDowell, who led 27 laps. He was also in the top 10, but the one that led the most laps was Todd Gilliland, who led 58 laps, and he ended up in 26th place because he got in a crash. But everyone's going to focus on the finish of this race. With 9 laps left, there was a crash that took out a large chunk of the field. Granted, none of it was like a serious accident, but the ones that were in the lead ended up falling back to about 20. When the green flag dropped with 6 laps left, Ryan Blaney was pretty much leading the entire time until about 1 lap left, and then Daniel Suarez, Kyle Busch, Austin Cindric, and Ryan Blaney all got about 4 cars wide. Heading into the last turn, you had 3 cars that were basically neck and neck, 3 cars across the finish line. Originally, NASCAR had Ryan Blaney winning. Then they had Kyle Busch winning. And then when they went to the replay and showed the replay, Daniel Suarez actually won that race by 0.0003 seconds. which basically means that a very tiny portion of his bumper, whether it was a piece of dust, whether it was a piece of fiberglass or anything, crossed that finish line before everybody else did. So this goes down, I believe, as the closest finish in Atlanta Motor Speedway history and one of the top 4 closest finishes in NASCAR history. And just by the way, NASCAR has reconstructed their point series where if you win a race, you automatically qualify for the playoffs. And then it kind of goes like who has the most points after that. You can see that every single race now means something versus like the Daytona 500. Obviously, that's the race that everybody wants to win. But you used to have situations like before NASCAR went with this point style that drivers knew that if you drove well enough, you were going to make the playoffs. So like if you consistently competed for the top 10, you were going to stockpile enough points where you were going to make it into the championship chase anyways and then drive. Now drivers know that if you don't win a race, you're not guaranteed to make that playoff field. So now every race matters, and you can see that just by the way this race finished, that every race matters. I just think NASCAR is so much better off now with this system than they were with the old system of the past.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't watch as much NASCAR as you do, but I do remember a lot of the guys I like to watch, and it's interesting when you see those close finishes like that, you know. And I just remember, you know, and what was that show, man? And Days of Thunder, just give me the high gear, you know. And I just remember that it's got the high gear. So I guess Suarez had the high gear in this race.
He had the high gear on that last lap, and this was Daniel Suarez's second career win, his first career win since 2017, and his first win with his new race team that is actually owned by Pitbull.
Oh, Pitbull owns that race team.
Yep. Wow. So it's his first win for Pitbull since he's gotten to the new since he got to
That's
his
interesting.
New
Okay.
And with the win, he obviously qualifies for the playoffs. So this will also be the first time that Daniel Suarez gets to compete in the actual playoff field because he's never accumulated enough. Well, no, 2017 was the last time because he did win in 2017, but he got eliminated right away because he crashed like in his first 2 playoff races. But for the most part, this is the first time that he's going to have a chance to drive for the championship at the end of the year because otherwise he typically doesn't accumulate enough points to even make that field.
Yeah, you know, and I'm hoping at some point, you know, and I really do need to get more into NASCAR. It's just, you know, we have Texas Motor Speedway down here in Texas. I really would like to see NASCAR kind of look more into expanding their marketing and their strategies into the western side of the U.S. You know,
well, they do this. They do this time of year because next week they are in Vegas, I believe.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is they're only going there like once every blue moon to the West Coast, right? I mean, I think they got one trip to California. Well, they have one trip, I think, to Vegas. I mean, there's a few, you know, times a year that they come there. I'd like to see them come a little bit more, or even I would like to see NASCAR do some small tracks, build some small tracks.
Well, they've done that now. So they go to California now. They go to Vegas twice a year now. They go once in the spring, once in the fall. They go to Phoenix twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. They go to California twice. They have the normal California Motor Speedway that they typically did this time of year, but now that that track has closed, California Motor Speedway is no longer there. So now you just have the Sears Point, now called Sonoma. You have Austin, Texas has a race this year. I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't know Austin had it. I thought it was Texas Motor Speedway.
No, Texas Motor Speedway has one April 14th, but then Austin, Texas has one March 24th.
Huh, I didn't know they had a track out there in Austin to do that.
Yep, so within 3 weeks, they have 2 races in Texas. Then you have Talladega down in Alabama. You were talking about the short tracks. Iowa's getting a race this year. So Iowa's got like a very short track. You have, I don't know where this track is. This is a new track this year. I don't know where it is, but it's a new track this year. But Chicago's getting their race again where they close down the entire city of Chicago and basically race downtown Chicago. So they are getting a lot more creative with some of these NASCAR races. Nashville's getting a race this year on another short track. And but
Nashville's still kind of on that East Coast side. Like, you know what I want to see them get more like into the Idahos, the Oregons, the Washington State. Yep. Start getting more out there on that West Coast. And even so, maybe just work more on your marketing to make NASCAR reputable or not reputable, relatable, right? Marketable to that side of the country, right? Because like 91% of NASCAR is white, 91%, and then 40% is female. But they really got it. The one thing NASCAR has to do a better job, but I'd like to see them do a better job, is getting their minority fan base. Try to really get a little bit more of that minority fan base to really grow it and get it more relatable.
Exactly. And I think eventually it'll get to that point. But up until then, I think at least they're doing a better job of getting to more markets that may have not always had a race, which is good. But that's all the time Jay and I have for you today. We'll be back tomorrow for our normal Tuesday show, and then Thursday and Friday, I believe. Jay, got anything else to say before we hop off?
No, brothers and sisters, everybody have a good rest of your day, man, and we'll catch you on the next rebound.